Hello, I'm Donald Maurice. Welcome to the NZBBC interview series. That stands for New Zealand Baby Boomer Composers. Over the months of September and October, I'm interviewing 10 composers, 2 from Auckland, 2 from Hamilton, 2 from Wellington, 2 from Christchurch and 2 from Dunedin. And this series is being hosted by the New Zealand School of Music at Victoria University and SOUNZ Centre for New Zealand Music. I'd like to welcome today Leonie Holmes. Leonie is a senior lecturer in composition and music studies at the University of Auckland. She receives frequent commissions from professional and community groups, and recent works have included commissions from the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, BBC Singers, King Singers, Voices New Zealand Chamber Choir, the Auckland Philharmonia and the Jade String Quartet. Her orchestral music has been released on the Atoll label with the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra. Stemming from her work as composer in schools in the 1990s, she is also interested in music education and in developing a musical language that will engage and challenge non-professional players. She has written many works for school and community groups and is active as a speaker, adjudicator and teacher within the New Zealand music community. Leonie has been composer in residence for the Nelson School of Music, the Auckland Philharmonia and the Manukau Symphony Orchestra, a coordinator of the Nelson Composers Workshop and is a member of the Composers Association of New Zealand. In 2018, her work Dance of the Wintersmith was a finalist in the SOUNZ Contemporary Award. So Leonie, can you tell us first of all where you were born, what your family situation was like in terms of music? Did you have music in the house with parents, brothers and sisters, etc.?
Okay, I was born in Auckland in a very small place which at that time was pretty much a village called Buckland's Beach, which is now suburbia actually, but at that time there was a beach, there was a wharf, there was just a few houses, and my father was a boatie and a journalist. Musical influences, well, my parents were both good singers, which I did not inherit actually, but my father was a big influence because he told me a lot about things like, because he was a writer, he talked about the first sentence hook, and he talked about inspiration versus perspiration, and the fact that he sort of believed in the 90% perspiration, 10% inspiration rule. He was always, in those days there was no internet, so I can remember him actually phoning in articles to the Auckland Star, which he then wrote for, where some poor secretary probably had to take dictation because he was running late with him. So he was creative in that way, and I think that rubbed off on me. And he used to play games like we'd both be trying to think what was that pitch, and he'd make me run to the piano and check it, and it was all very sort of creatively focused music, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. And what about instruments? Did you learn an instrument at that point?
I started the piano when I was 6, and I had the most beautiful teacher called Mrs. Bevan, who was just lovely, great for a young, sort of quite sensitive, quiet little girl, and I just adored it and adored her. And I started the violin probably when I was at secondary school. In fact, I learned from the itinerant system, the violin, so I had about 5 different teachers for 5 years, I think, but went into the Auckland Youth Orchestra with that. So yes, piano and violin.
And you continued these instruments?
The piano, yes. Violin, no, because I worked as a kitchen hand and sliced my finger.
Dear.
So it's got something there which I know I can't push down on a string, but that's probably no loss to the music community, I don't think.
And was there a particular point in your life when you just decided, I want to be a composer, I want to write music? Can you remember how that happened?
Not like that, but what I did was I was constantly improvising. So the piano was my instrument, and I guess I learned pretty quickly that if you don't want to do the dishes, you can do the practice, but actually what I did was I started just playing anything I'd heard, any piece that I'd heard on the radio I needed to pick out by ear. And I just started making up stuff. And when I went to secondary school, we had an amazing teacher, it all comes down to teachers, I think, everywhere, called Neil Guyan. This was at Pakuranga College. And whilst he was there was an incredibly thriving music scene. And that was at a time before composing as a student at school just wasn't a thing. But even so, he really encouraged me in it, and I started to write pieces then. I remember entering the what was then the Westpac community chamber music competition, and getting judged by William Southgate and something or other, and those sort of things started there. Mm.
So what are your memories of school and primary school, of music in primary school?
Parklands
What was
Beach
it like?
Primary. There wasn't any music in our school time. The only thing I can remember was we had to stand outside for assembly on the asphalt, no matter what the weather, and we had to march into school to a brass band march. I remember that very clearly.
Singing in primary school?
There was nothing, nothing that I recall anyway. So just that one memory of marching into class every morning. And I can even remember the tune, but I can't remember what it's called afterwards.
But the secondary school was a different
Secondary school was
situation.
everything. It was orchestra, choir, violin lessons, chamber music. There was a lot of stuff going on there.
So I know you have very strong interest in music education. Looking back to what it's like then and what it's like now, how would you compare the experience of a primary school child today musically compared with then?
I'm not so up on what happens in primary schools because my work was mostly in intermediate and secondary schools. I would imagine it depends a lot on the school, to be honest, but certainly there would be no chance that you wouldn't have to do some sort of music education in primary school, whereas I don't recall any at all. But I did work a lot in the sort of intermediate and secondary area, and at that time that I was working as a composer in schools, I think it was still even then quite a new subject, and now completely understood that everyone will write music.
So when you were at secondary school and you were writing music, at which point did you think, I'm going to go to university and study music?
Well, music was always the thing. Actually, funnily enough, I did want to be a journalist, like my father, but he put me off that. He said journalism is no career for a woman. And I thought, okay. I mean, imagine that, just saying okay when someone says something like that. But that was very indicative of the times, and the fact that perhaps he thought it was a hard drinking, hard kind of going culture. Having put that aside, I obviously probably wasn't that keen on it because I thought, oh, all right then. But apart from that, it was always music. No sort of argument. It was just a matter of whether I did a piano performance degree or a composition degree. And
what did you do?
And fortunately, I did a composition degree because I would never have the nerves to play in front of people now anyway. So.
And this was in Auckland?
It was in Auckland, yeah.
So can you tell us about the experience of studying composition in Auckland?
Well, my first teacher in Auckland was Douglas Mews Senior. Such a character, and he just exuded ebullience and zest for life. And I remember going into tutorials where he would say, right, show us what you've got, put something on the piano, and we'd play it out on the piano, and he would be moving like that. And I was like, this person is actually feeling my music, what I'm playing, and that was a very sort of empowering feeling. I don't remember much technically, except he did a lot of palindromes and putting things forwards and back, and a lot of just instinctive music making.
Yes.
But it was mostly just that feeling that everybody, not just me, was valued, and that the music they made he felt internally was very, very inspiring. And the other teacher, of course, was John Rimmer, a great influence. And of course later on John Elmsly as well.
I have a very strong memory of Douglas Mews Senior at the Nelson School of Music Composers Workshop. You may have been there. I remember one where he sat at the organ and called out to the audience for notes.
Oh, yeah.
C sharp, G sharp, C, whatever notes they came. And then he sat there and played those notes and improvised for a good 5 to 10 minutes, creating a fugue on those notes.
I don't remember that. I must not have been there, but that's exactly the sort of thing he would do.
A brilliant musician.
Yeah.
And the other thing I remember him saying is that he got tired of all the composers starting their pieces gently and building up. So why don't some of you just start with a bang, like whoomph?
Smash.
And he then, of course, played a piece improvised on the spot that began that way.
Began with a whoosh.
Do you remember anything like that from him about how to begin a piece?
I don't remember that from him. I remember strongly John Rimmer saying things like, why is there always an MF? You know, where's the extremes? So I remember that from him. Yeah.
So did you, you completed your degree at Auckland, did you do any study overseas?
I have not studied overseas. I've travelled a lot overseas, but never to study.
Right.
So, yeah, I sort of fell into teaching in schools after that one composer in schools year.
Yeah.
And that's happened for another 10 years, and things just kind of kept happening. So I never did any extended period of study overseas.
So the question I'm asking all of the interviewees is, what is your take on national identity and music? What does it mean to you? Is it important? Is it significant? Does it not matter at all? What does it mean?
I think in terms of the sort of musical lineage of composers in New Zealand, it means a lot. Because of those composers such as Jack Boddy, John Rimmer, John Cousins, Chris Cree-Brown, because Lilburn is seen as that sort of first figure, Alfred Hill, Lilburn, and then all these people followed, we get a strong sense of musical identity from that, and we're definitely influenced by the pieces that they composed. In terms of feeling like I have to write music with a national identity, I don't really. I know there's been a lot of talk about landscape in music and composers who depict the landscape or even write music anti-landscape, so that it's the other way around. That's been a thing, and maybe still is for composers as well, definitely. So the sort of openness and spaciousness. John Rimmer used to say that we're all surrounded by ocean, that's why we've got all this space, and when you think of something like his Where Sea Meets Sky series of 2 pieces, you can hear that. For me personally, I think it's more of a personal language.
So if you're just driving in the car and you wanted to listen to some music just to relax, what would you turn on? What would you tune into?
I'd turn it off. I just don't listen to music to relax, because as soon as it's on, I'm in it. No matter what it is. I guess I'm a geeky person, because I'll be listening to bass lines, I'll be listening to rhythms, I'll be listening to the clave beat, I'll be listening to the kick and snare, I'll be listening to the melody. And I probably drive the margarita because
so you don't do background music?
I do not do background music, not really.
Okay.
Have you got any pieces that you've written, well you will have some, that really stand out as for you significant landmark pieces that you think back to and think, yeah, that was a great moment?
I don't think I've ever written anything yet that I'm totally satisfied with. I just don't know how that would happen. I know other people say this is the piece that I got absolutely right, or so I tend to be a little bit more neurotic is the word. I just feel I want to get it right, it never has quite. But just recently, probably, I would say Piece for the King's Singers, just because it was such an interesting experience to write for Voices New Zealand and the King's Singers, and they did the festival, Auckland and Wintersmith festivals last year. In chamber music, I'd say the Dance of the Wintersmith I'd be really happy with. Because I always start with solos in chamber music. It's funny that I think it's because in my mind, I actually let the instruments be the music. It's just a mind trick where you're actually not composing it yourself, so it's okay. These instruments are just coming up with themselves, and that's why I always start with solos, which is when you said starting with a bang. Look, oops, I don't tend to do that, it's always a solo thing. And Dance by Wintersmith was for violin and piano, and it was actually based, the first time I've done this, on a book by Terry Pratchett, who I really like because it's theoretically a humorous and fantasy book, quite possibly for a young audience, but actually has a lot of wisdom in it. I always feel like having humour and wisdom at the same time is a fantastic thing. So I based this piece on someone desperate to join in on something, join in on a dance that they were not allowed into. So it's got this violin solo. Actually, maybe if we're going to have a listen to it, it would be great to hear the violin solo at the beginning, which was this girl desperate to join in on something, and then she does join in illegally to this dance, and it's kind of whirling around, but it's a little bit wrong at the same time, and then at the end, she's just been suspended in the air, and I had the pianist and violinist Sarah Watkins, Andrew Beard, they were amazing about this, actually whispering and humming the sound. So when it was first played, people were looking around to see who was starting to whistle or sing. But anyway, maybe that piece.
Want to listen?
So that's kind of how it starts, and then maybe if we can jump to the middle, it gives you an idea of the actual dance part. And then there's this very still ending where I sort of envisaged this girl, who was in fact learning to be a witch at the time, just sort of begin to rise off the ground, arms extended. That's how I ended.
So, as a teacher of composition, you encounter students who come along with their own ideas. And I'm just wondering, in your own composition and their composition, to what degree you've experimented with techniques, compositional techniques that you've abandoned or don't like, you've tried them out, passed on, and to what degree you kind of tolerate your students going to areas that are not your own?
With total tolerance. I think everything's open, everything's there. Me, probably a bit of a magpie, really. I don't think I've discarded anything or indeed gone into anything totally. If I use serial technique, it's in the middle of an orchestra piece like From, where I have a 12-row pattern and I use that, but with lots of other stuff going on as well. Extended techniques, yeah, we talk about them all, and I wouldn't like to think there's any style of music that I pushed in the other at all. And I think the thing that makes a piece of music for me would be how it grips you in the gut, rather than any particular style or technique that you use. It's more why you choose that is important for that utterance, important for that piece, and it hits something. Either in yourself as a composer, or you feel that the occasion will be right for this to hit other people in that way. That's what I'll always be looking for. And I come back to the fact that Douglas Mews instilled that feeling in me of that's what music's about. So I guess I hope I can try to do that no matter what the style of the students come out with. That I'll always try and really feel it, talk about it from that point of view. That will be the hope. Of course, I'm sure we all push our own barrows totally, but yeah, I try very much.
So would you encourage your students to learn to do a lot of writing in the style of as part of their training?
And writing the style of, it's not something that I have done in composition class, but definitely as a musicianship class, yes, because I mean you don't learn painting at school by saying, well, that's red, and this is what we call blue, and we put it together and makes that colour. In an art class, people will be expected to sort of paint around and make something. So my idea of an ideal materials in music class would be for people to try to compose. And this doesn't mean that you have to be thinking, what's original, I don't know. It could be that you are collecting technique by writing the style. But in a composition class, not so much, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I come down to that question of being original, which is a really interesting concept.
Yeah.
What does it mean
Yeah.
to be original? That means you can't use 1-4-5 harmony anymore.
Right.
Or what does it actually mean
Yeah.
to be original?
Yeah.
Challenging questions. Now, when I read about you, I read a lot about your involvement with young people in music education. I'm just wondering how that happened. Why did you get involved with that, and how has it influenced what you've written?
Yeah. Well, how did it happen? I think I applied for a position as composer residence. No, composer of schools position that was at that time run by the then Ministry of Education and in partnership with what would have been there before Creative New Zealand. And they ran it together.
Two Arts Council, I suppose it would have called then.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. And I applied for this position and was successful. So I was just basically thrown into 3 schools. There was an intermediate, there was Auckland Normal Intermediate, Upper College, and Wintersmith College, as it was then called. No, that's called now Wintersmith College. And had to learn how to teach composition to school students. Basically involved at intermediate age, just basically grabbing a whole pile of instruments and doing a lot of improvising. And for that reason, I found quite an affinity at the time with the layers of things, almost a minimalist approach of melodic ideas. I did a lot of grabbing manuscript and writing down student compositions and then arranging them with students for a whole group. A reasonable amount of chaos actually ensued, and then at secondary school, perhaps more one-on-one type of things. And after that, I continued doing that for at least 10 years. This is back in the day now, actually. So it's been a while since I've been teaching in schools, although now and then I do teacher workshops. But for me, I think what rubbed off on my music, if anything, was I used to think, what a great idea, I wish I'd done that. I remember Jack Bobby saying the same thing at an Nelson workshop. I wish I'd written that piece. And it happens with students and think, that's so good. It gives you sort of an idea. Other than that, I used a lot of tinkly instruments, as you have to do, glockenspiels, vibraphones, marimbas, percussion instruments. I think a lot of the layering and patterning that I did then has stuck with me a little bit.
So part of the job description was to create pieces they could perform, and part was to train them to compose themselves?
No, it was totally their own performances of their own pieces.
Right.
Yeah. And we did everything. We did concerts of student compositions in intermediate and secondary school. One of the ones I went to was Parker College, my old school, Neil Klein. We had concerts every June.
So why did the scheme stop?
I don't know, I can't answer
Lack of
that.
money.
Yeah.
Sounds like it was very successful.
Yeah, it was a good thing. Well, I'd say that because I got a lot of work after that.
And so how was the transition out of that into what you're doing now? What happened between that and
So, yeah. What happened was that I was out of a job. No, what happened after that was I did a lot of work in schools, that's right. Then I had 2 children, and then I was out of a job. Went back teaching itinerant, but I also started teaching at university. 1 year I was composer in residence with the APO. So it's always been a sort of freelance composer, writing by commission, teaching in schools. I had 2 or 3 years working as a secretary in the Royal Schools of Music, Associated Board exam office, just making my way really. But I was always involved with music in some way, and I did manage to make a living all through that time. Nowadays I'm permanently at university.
So kind of a double question here, and it's really how would you define yourself as a composer? How would one recognise your compositions as being by you? And that also leads into the question of what is your composition process? Do you sit at a desk and wait for inspiration, or how does it all work?
Yeah, I do all of that. What's the first bit of the question?
How would you identify you? What are the distinctive features of your music?
I actually don't have an answer to that. I almost hope I don't know, because it kind of cuts me into a corner a little bit. I think it goes back to slightly colloquial style that I have. I always like to think that instruments are having a discussion with each other. Again, that's probably how I often start with solos. And then one instrument will answer and another one will come in. It doesn't work so well with full orchestra, of course. You've got to have a bit more of an idea. I compose at the piano, and I generally spend several weeks in a state of panic. And then after that, the panic is for everything I must do something.
So when you're going to compose a piece, do you kind of in your head create the total structure first, or does the structure emerge from what you put on the page?
I would love to say I was the sort of person that structured first, or walked along the beach and came back with a piece. But no, I tend to, I start with an idea at the piano with manuscript paper. After that, I do spend a bit of time deconstructing it, deciding what a lot of material is, what possible harmonies there are. I quite often write a set of chords and invert them and just do a few things like that, just sort of like housework before you actually start. And then for the rest of the time I'll be between the computer and the piano. And quite often just through composed. Having said that, I quite often then find I rearrange things, so that what I thought was the beginning actually becomes here. Then I go, well, what's the beginning? So I have to compose that. So it's a bit of both. It's a bit of construction at the time, a bit of pre-thought, and a bit of changing my mind later.
So you've lived through composing with a pen on paper and not being able to hear it back, through to the age when now you can type it all in and hear it, instant feedback. To what degree has that changed the way you approach composition?
Probably a reasonable amount. certain things are just not conducive to hearing back. I mean, you wouldn't bother.
Yeah.
But if you are going to use playback, I think it's useful in terms of getting an idea of form, especially if you can put the music aside for a while and then come back a few weeks later or a week later or a day later, depending on how late you actually are, and just sit back and listen, not to the computer, but listen to the computer playing, but imagine the sounds, which is why I don't use realistic sounds. I mean, I wouldn't go to MIDI, I'm not that, I wouldn't go there, but a surveyor's sound set is fine for me. I don't want realistic orchestral sounds. So that I can imagine the sounds in my mind and get a sense of flow. So I think it's useful for that. Yeah. And then you can find that the slow passage took too long, your fast passage was too short, as quite often happens, because to write fast music is a lot harder to write slow. So from a point of view of formal movement through time, it's handy.
I often wonder, with the days when composers couldn't listen back, they had to see it on the page and hear it in their head.
Yeah.
Is that becoming a lost art to read a score and hear it in your head?
Yeah, I like that.
Just push the button and it plays it back.
Yeah, true. It only works with certain sorts of music. If your sounds are of a sort that you really need to experience or to improvise with or to hear in your head, then it won't work. It depends on the style.
Is there any other piece of your music you'd like us to listen to, or should we go to some questions?
Well, it got me thinking about the layering and the tinkling effect of teaching young people. Probably that one thing that's come to me from that is layering, and I wouldn't say I'm a fan of total minimalism, but I do tend to structure things where they can be put together. And the example I'm thinking of is an acoustic piece called Aquae Sulis. And again, it starts with a solo, alto flute solo, and it's very free. It's like that colloquial idea of an instrument just talking, just letting it all hang out and talk. And then a viola enters, and bass clarinet enters, because I'm very into the middle instruments, the bass clarinet, alto flute, viola come with sounds. And then when the double basses and cello start, they take the alto flute beginning, which was so free, and they rhythmicize it. Just absolute straight quavers, and that becomes the rhythmicized bass for what happens next. So maybe we should listen to that.
interesting, very beautiful. The layering you talked about there. So I think we can open to the floor now for some questions, please.
You were discouraged from going into journalism because it was no job for a woman, but you undertook composition when there wouldn't have been as many prominent women composers around as there are now. So did you have any women role models as composers?
That's a really good question, actually. It's a kind of double thing that I think I must have had, where it seemed to be quite normal to be encouraged to write music when all my teachers were male, and all of the music that they taught us was by male composers. And it never really occurred to me at the time, being young. These days, again, it's completely different. We are much more aware. We're aware to play women composers to our students and to think that this is quite the norm. But at the time, a lot of us who were studying at the time, there was Dorothy Carr, there was Edie Castor Robinson, Glenda Keane and myself, all went through university fully supported by our teachers, and yet with no women role models. And interestingly, that my father, who was obviously old school, old generation, also supported it totally, and yet wasn't that keen on me joining his own profession. So yeah, it's a good question.
You talked earlier on in the interview about your nerves and your reluctance to do a degree in performance. While it may not be as direct, I assume that premiering works and presenting your compositions to colleagues, other people, it could be quite daunting. How do you, moreover, what gives you confidence in your composition?
Yes, you're quite right, it is quite daunting. And I think by increments one becomes a bit accustomed to it. Just as I suppose if I had done a performance degree, I would have perhaps got more used to playing in front of people. I guess it's interesting because composers, it's sometimes said that composers get into composing because they want to sit out, they want to not be the people in front. I don't think that's always true, and I also think that composers have reasonably good egos, really, because otherwise, as you say, I don't know whether we could really do it to have someone playing our music. So there's a little bit of a nuance there that means you can be a bit shy and retiring on the one hand, but have enough self-belief underneath to do it on the other hand. But it is terrifying. I think most of us get quite nervous. I think it's unusual for a composer not to get nervous, depending on the situation. I suppose the Michael Fowler Centre, filled with thousands of fans of the King's singers, would be a time when I was utterly terrified, because there they are, and there are their adoring fans, and here's a new piece of music that they've only had for a while, with Voices New Zealand, a cappella, coming up for the first time, and not in the style that the King's singers are picked known for. That was a time when I was probably the hands were freezing, and I was a little bit worried. Even though they're fantastic, I knew it would be all right, but it was all right. But yeah, it is nerve-wracking, and it's exciting at the same time, I guess.
How else do you write music with an audience in mind? Do you write to express something personally, or to appeal, or to make people feel something?
I do have an audience in mind, but not so much whether they will like it, because whoever's sitting in the audience, you might get that many different feelings about your music. So to go there to think I want to please an audience is a bad path. But on the other hand, I do want to communicate to an audience, and I think of this triangle. If there is a composer that's different from the performers, then there's this triangle of composer, performer, audience, which I see as linked for that time that music's going on in a very personal way. So I do want to mostly write what I feel, but I certainly do hope that other people feel something from it as well. But it's not something that I would definitely set out to do, say, oh, that audience is that type of audience, that's a younger audience, this is that would be not what I do. Yeah. But I do still think of live performance as the utmost expression of our art form, because music exists in time. We're so lucky we have an art form that never stops. Our recording is a little bit like taking that and putting it aside when time actually doesn't stop, and you're always thinking, I'm hearing what I'm hearing right now, I'm comparing it to what I heard just then, I am guessing what I'm going to hear next. And if you've also got the live element to that, even if it's a piece of electronic music that is being played in an audience situation that doesn't even need players, but if it does, that's another part of the triangle, then that is the most exciting part of it, I think.
I'm kind of making an assumption here, but it seems as though in New Zealand music schools, we tend to be quite receptive to innovation and creating new musical ideas. And I'd be interested to know, and I would have liked to ask Ken as well, I just didn't even think about it, but historically there's been conflicts between innovative ideologies and more conservative ideologies. I'd be interested to know if you think that there's a downside to being so accommodating of the quite drastic variety of different approaches we have in New Zealand to music composition.
I can't think of any right now. Technique is important, and I think you can discuss technique in pretty much any style of music, and the same things apply no matter what the style is. So you've still got to think about how the music is structured, you've got to think about gestures, you've got to think about beginnings and endings and textures, or if harmony's there, harmony becomes part of texture. So what we're describing through time is the same no matter what the style of music. And I think there's good music written in any style. And even, who am I to say what's good music anyway? But again, I come back to the fact of whether it grips me in a visceral way. And a lot of that isn't so much to do with style of music as how things are put together and the technique and sensitivity and the control of materials that comes with it. So what was the question? Whether there's a disadvantage to not being stylistically rigid in some way, maybe?
I suppose it's kind of predicated on my belief that it's very difficult to differentiate between music that is trivial and music that is quite inherently valuable when there are so many different, there's the menagerie of different musical approaches all around New Zealand. It can be very difficult for me to discriminate between good music and bad music when there's so many new ideas around every corner. I suppose that's where my question comes from. I'd be interested to know if there is any kind of downside to being so liberal and accommodating.
I think that's something only history can tell us. Some pieces of music will have a life that goes on, and others, for whatever reason, will not. How can we make that discovery unless people are creating and trying things? So sometimes it comes down to pure luck that somebody's music gets taken up and carried like a torch. Other times it's obviously amazing genius music that we need to keep. But without everything stirring around, then we can't know until afterwards what will become part of the repertoire of the future. Yeah.